All right, Reece, who do we have on today? What are we going to learn?
Yeah, so today we have Scott Turner and Amanda Trevino on. Scott's a builder in Austin. Amanda's a real estate professional. And basically, we did an episode with Scott here a few months ago talking about all things speculative building. This is the kickoff to a 3-part series. This one specifically is how do we start the process in the spec build? That's finding the lot, that's knowing what lot to buy, and all the different components of a lot of volume and checking deals, getting the right people involved in the partnerships. And if that's you, that's wanting to learn more about the process of starting a speculative build, this is the episode for you. There's a ton of knowledge, a ton of practicality, and a lot of actionable tips. So let's buckle up. Let's do it.
Let's do it.
We're live here with our good friend Scott Turner returning for episode number 2, and our new friend Amanda Trevino. Amanda, go ahead and give yourself the introduction first. Scott, we'll let you do the second introduction just because you've already had an episode with us. But Amanda, kick us off. Tell us who you are.
Thank you so much. My name is Amanda Trevino. I'm a realtor here in Austin. I come from a family of real estate brokers involved in all sorts of kinds of real estate. My father's a home builder here. I've been working for about 10 years with a large chunk of my business representing various builders in different types of master plan and infill developments, from listing homes after they're completed to helping, like we're going to talk about today, from the ground up when someone's seeking out those opportunities.
Yeah, cool. Good to have you on, Amanda. So just to clarify, so what percentage of your time is spent on like the buy side, helping builders buy properties versus selling them?
Much more selling. I'm not, and sometimes, it depends on getting the right deal. Most of my builders are also brokers, and they'll look for my advice in what lots they're looking at, but don't always need my help in buying that lot. But we'll chat to figure out the opportunity and to see how sellable a home is later. So occasionally I am the person that's helping buy a lot, but more so preparing for the ultimate sale of a completed home.
All right. Yeah, that's a great clarification. That makes sense. That's what I was getting at. So yeah, essentially you have like the buy side mandate because there's a sell side, kind of like a predetermined sell side mandate.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
And so I'm Scott Turner. I'm the owner of Riverside Homes. We're a urban infill construction company here, residential scale. So we do everything from single lots up to 12 to 24 townhomes or detached garden homes, things like that. We've been doing it for about 20 years here, and I've been a broker, as Amanda mentioned. I've been a broker for longer than I've been a home builder, and that's always been a competitive advantage in the market because, again, you're building to a market if you're going to be doing spec homes, which is what you see a lot of in urban locations. And Amanda actually is a valuable part of my team. Anyone who's doing a spec really has to have market insight that you only gain by being in the market. And since most of us are out there building homes and developing and so on, as opposed to helping people buy and sell, you need a very, very good realtor who is familiar with those markets to really help evaluate the opportunity and then sell that same house that you're about to build. Because with a spec, certainly an infill, most of the time, the buyers are already looking for an existing home. They don't drive around central Austin saying, well, I'm going to buy a lot and build a custom. That's what they do out in suburbs. But you're always competing with existing homes when buyers are looking around. And so realtors, again, are an integral part of that business. I think the vast majority of our sales over the years have had a buyer's agent, bring us a buyer.
Sure.
So they're an important part.
And love it. And I think that's super important. And understanding your guys' relationship, how you guys work together, that's awesome. I think even more so, this is a piggyback off our original episode of like the step-by-step of how to actually do a spec build or a speculative build. So for our listeners, what we're going to be doing is we're going to be diving deeper into knowing your market. And that's why we have Amanda here on the show along with Scott, because Amanda is an expert in that. So I think just to lead off, Amanda, I think, with you working with so many builders and the number of builders that you do, where do you think builders, their initial thought process goes wrong initially in terms of what's a good lot to buy versus a bad lot to buy?
Yeah, I mean, I think it is very easy to assume all situations are the same. Every lot is the same. Every neighborhood is the same. Everything's going to have the same return. Everything's going to have the same benefits or challenges. And especially when we're talking infill construction, gosh, this is also site specific. We could be talking the same neighborhood and in 2 lots for sale at the same price, and you would have totally different exit strategies or potentials on those 2 lots because of what they're next door to, what they're behind, what the setbacks are for that particular lot, what the deed restrictions say. And if you're not thoughtful about that from the start and just assume everything is the same and every home, this generic box can be built on any lot you find or will give you the same return, you're certainly doing yourself a disservice there. I mean, hopefully that's why you get paid the big bucks, right? It's because you're a little bit more thoughtful about this. But certainly that upfront, Scott and I do a lot of upfront research on these lots, and I don't have a perfect crystal ball. I wish I did. But we can use the data that does exist and try and forecast what our expectations are for a home. And sometimes that changes. And sometimes we miss. Hopefully we're right more often than we're not. But we're not just guessing.
Totally.
Yeah. So on that, so that's an interesting point. What you just said, you're like, so that's why you get paid the big bucks, because it's kind of hard, right?
Yeah.
And to some extent, it's a little bit more art than science,
Yeah.
And it's not as easy as just saying, I'm going to build the same house over and over again.
Yeah. Well, I guess like starting at a high level in terms of like knowing your market, that, I mean, it's like, I guess you went down, you're talking immediately to the lot level, right? Like there's all these specifics at the lot level. Are you advising builders on like where in Austin, they should be investing and why? Because I think that would be interesting to our audience, right? So they're thinking about their market. Maybe they don't live in Austin, but just like using Austin as an example. If I did want to start getting into real estate investing, how should I think about like which parts of the city are most interesting to get into? Yeah.
Yeah, I think that, yes, I wish that was an easier test case or question to answer than it really is. But I mean, some of the considerations in this market today in Austin are, it's probably a little unique to Austin, but what areas are already oversaturated with new construction and what areas are not. So it's important to think about this from the listing agent side, but also the buyer's agent side. It helps that I do both, so I can hear what buyers are saying. But if I look in neighborhoods and I can look at new construction sitting on the market for 200, 300 days right now, like that sounds like a pretty terrible place to think about building my newest project. But if I look at neighborhoods where things are moving more quickly, if we can, potentially a more up and coming neighborhood at a price point, hopefully there's some precedent for new construction and the prices that you want there. But I want to look right now when I'm thinking about having a product available farther in the future. I want to make sure that hopefully, as best as we can predict, it's not going to be flooded with inventory. So yes, I mean, and then I have general searches set up in terms of where I know my builders like to end price point wise based on what it costs them to build. And, kind of backwards going to what it makes sense to pay for lots. So I have large central Austin searches set up, like based on the size of the lot I think we would need. And I just keep an eye on what's coming up that could be interesting, and then looking at what the inventory and how the new construction's moving in those areas.
Okay.
I think that's a good point about looking at inventory and keeping these searches set up, right? What you want is exposure to the market in these different neighborhoods, which again can vary even street by street. North of a street or south of a street sometimes are very different markets, and you really need to be aware of those and then pay attention to what's available for sale. You can look at things like frequency of new build permits. If it's an existing neighborhood, again, we do a lot of infill. Hey, if you see a few builders and they're doing some new construction over there, that's a good sign. You can go check out some of those. Obviously, go look around, right? Drive around the neighborhoods, see how many new homes there are. Go preview those homes. We'll get to that in a minute about kind of like figuring out what your competition is doing and how to build to and design to the right market. But in general, you're looking for, are things being marketed as teardowns, right? If you see a lot of MLS listings that are saying this is a teardown, then hey, there's definitely some precedent there. And then obviously it's price point. You also have to pay attention to what things are selling for, because that is going to drive your entire transaction.
Yeah.
The more new construction, as Amanda points out, you have in a neighborhood, the less risky it is to some extent. There's lots of comps and so on. So that means you might make a little less. You're not quite investing in the hotness, so to speak, of various neighborhoods, but it's also a little more stable. So there's a balance there. But in the end, you have to know your market. And sometimes that's as simple as saying, stick with what you know. If you're already building in a particular neighborhood, it doesn't have to be infill, then you kind of know what people are paying if you're building a custom, et cetera. And that gives you insight into that particular place. And that's a good place to start.
For sure. Well, and even Amanda, you mentioned that, like you want to, stay away from stuff that's getting like super saturated with building permits, but also you want to be in like up and coming neighborhoods. Is it as simple as just like picking an area with like very low density building with a lot of like older homes that, might have some new, urban developments happening next to it? You just go in and pick and say like, I'm going to take a bet, and I think that I can push this house and I can build something new and I can sell at this price point based on the comps? Or is there anything more specific that you would add to the strategy of evaluating?
I mean, it's risky to be the first in a neighborhood. There can be huge payoff there because you're unique and you're the first one. But it's certainly risky to be the most expensive home in a neighborhood if there's not already some precedence for development like that. But absolutely, like location, proximity to downtown, to employment centers, to mass transit. I mean, those things are always going to be valuable. So it seems hard to bet against that. If you can find some infrastructure that is making a location desirable. And then, gosh, I just like can't overstate like being mindful about things that give you a bad feeling when you're looking at a lot. Once you picked it, and you're building that home, you can't undo the massive power line that you thought always kind of gave you a bad feeling, or the home or the parking lot that you back up to that you think, oh, someone might not love that. I can only make the finishes so pretty to overcome certain aspects of a lot. So, I'm of the opinion I'd rather pay a little bit more for the lot and not have those concerns than try and get the lot that seems like the best deal and it can really bite you in the end.
Yeah. Those fringy lots really, the risk gets amplified, right? So if you're paying a little less for a lot today, well, that's 3 or 4 times, out of the sales price. So I remember the second spec home we ever did, there was a bus stop right out in front on the corner. And I didn't think anything of it. Urban location, home prices were still relatively affordable in this neighborhood. But there was an apartment complex down the street. And so the bus stop was pretty frequently used, as it turns out. And that was kind of an objection, that people didn't want just people sort of standing around in their front yard all the time. Now today, I think we probably paid $100,000 for that lot, and it's probably worth $900,000 today just for the dirt. So times change, but that's kind of Amanda's point, is you really kind of have to pay attention to what's around you, both the pro and the con, because ultimately that's going to impact your price, right? And I think that's a good, that's an important part of the puzzle, right? What is your exit? How do you determine that?
Yeah, for sure. Go ahead, Matt. I have one piece that I do want to piggyback on this, but if you want to go.
No, go ahead.
No. I mean, I think this piece on the lots is important. I think just for the listeners, in terms of like doing it in order of the kind of at a market level, I thought I liked what Amanda was saying earlier around, just looking at how fast new construction is selling in a market, right? So like that's the existing available supply and how fast is that selling? And then the other thing I would look at is what Scott said, like the new permits, right, that are being pulled. Then it's like the in progress construction, and then you have a pretty good starting point. And then you guys are getting into the actual lots themselves now, right?
Yeah. How do you find the right lot and then know the right deal, right? So there's the characteristics of the lot itself, which we'll get to, but in the end, it's your price ceiling, right? What is feasibly achievable, right? Because every neighborhood has a ceiling, right? Doesn't matter how big the house is. There's a limit on, nothing's ever sold over $1 million. Well, if you build a 5,000 square foot house that you think you're going to sell for $2 million, that's probably not happening. That's probably pretty risky, right?
Yep.
So you start with what's your price ceiling in the neighborhood, because that's kind of everything goes down from there. But really, you're also then looking for what I call kind of the sweet spot, where demand is highest. So not every neighborhood wants 3,000 square foot homes. Not every neighborhood will support the price point that a 3,000 square foot home and the related costs will have to bear. So some neighborhoods it's 2,000 square feet. Some neighborhoods, the more affordable, the more the product shrinks, right? Where you maybe try and get multiple units on a lot instead of one big house. So it's all relative, but that's something you really have to pay attention to is what's the sweet spot of how much do you have to build versus what you think that maximum sales price is, because you can build the most high-end, best-looking house anybody's ever seen as a spec, but that doesn't mean you're going to make any money on it, right?
Right.
I've seen a lot of beautiful houses, and I don't know that anybody made any money on that because I know how much this stuff costs to do.
Totally.
And that's the other thing, right? Price ceilings come with a design and a spec associated with them, right? And again, both of those parameters are in play here, so you don't want to over-improve, in other words.
For some reason, it was like reminding me of the show Pimp My Ride exhibit, just like making the most like blinged out house possible. No one buys
right, and like MTV Cribs, right? Not Masterpiece House, but it's still pretty good,
Well,
we're gonna have to get Dr. Dollar a chain, a gold chain with a dollar sign on it. I love it.
Well, and to the idea of over improving or figure out what that ceiling and price is, I think that Scott is really great at this, and I think it's important to get whatever third party you want to look at this. Obviously, I'm going to put a plug for a real estate professional, but I think it's always it's natural to think your baby is the prettiest baby that's ever existed, right? Or I build the best home, or it doesn't matter what the comps are, mine's going to be better. You want to really be realistic on the front end. As much as you can be. You can try and be a little optimistic, but you need someone maybe to try and objectively look at your product and what you're building and help you fit that into the pricing that's going on.
Yeah, totally. Well, and that was one of my questions was, Amanda, when we were talking about like, okay, so like starting like big picture, like know your neighborhoods, right? Like how do we know our market? How do we pick the neighborhoods, all the things that go into it? Scott, you made the comment about the bus stop thing, and Amanda, you're talking about, the parking lot or the power line or the whatever. How do you balance as a builder, not getting in your head about, I don't know, this power line might be a deal breaker. I don't know, it's right by a bus stop. And like, how do you balance that to get, okay, this is a good lot, this is a lucrative lot, this makes sense to take a bet on, and insulate yourself not to get into the wrong lot, build this speculative house, considering the price ceilings, and then get flipped?
I can answer that one real simply. You have to say no a lot. Right? It's okay to say, no, I'm not buying that one, right? If you're going out looking around, I don't even know how many deals I've said, no, that doesn't quite work. Again, something's behind it. I'm probably a little too conservative there. But again, the risk is amplified, right? You buy that lot and you might think it's a good price, but, it's got something wrong with it. Well, that downside gets amplified when you go to sell. So you just practice a lot, right? Look at a lot of lots, run the numbers, get familiar with your market, and it's okay to say, I don't know, that one doesn't quite do it for me, because you're going to make an informed choice on the next one.
Well, I think that's good for. Oh, go ahead.
And then I think once you get saturated in a neighborhood, you find the right deal, you get saturated in the neighborhood, you start finding more deals in that neighborhood. And you really get a sense of what is good and not. And the neighbor comes up to you and said, oh, I know the guy down there, that's the lot. And then you already have some level of comfort, but I agree with the saying no a lot. The best thing, some of the best deals I do or my clients do are the ones we don't do, right? Like stay away from scary things.
Totally. Well, and I think that's massively applicable and helpful for the listener, right? Because like if I hear a lot of custom builders saying, I'm going to start getting into specs, not have to deal with the customers anymore. And I think that's helpful for people that are starting that journey going down the speculative route is like, okay, there's a lot to it to understanding the market, but even more actionable, like it's running deals. It's looking at opportunities. It's checking the numbers on it. It's taking these types of things into considerations. It's checking with a very quality real estate professional that has those insights, and you can build that partnership. So I think that's great. Volume and deals. You got to be running numbers.
So we've kind of covered price point and the related size, right? How big do you need to build to hit that price point that you want to hit? And then the next step, really, to kind of what you were saying there, Reece, is really kind of what to build now, right? it's style, right? And some of that's where I think a lot of times it's hard to sometimes, as Amanda points out, separate out your personal preference from, what the market wants. And I think every real estate agent has probably seen some houses with some pretty distinct style choices that somebody made. And as a custom builder, you're building whatever somebody wants you to build, right? So you're glad to build highly personalized, highly customized homes because that's what makes your clients happy, right? But trying to then understand what the market wants, right? You got to tone it down a little bit, right? Various finishes aren't necessarily for everybody, but you also want to build something that is current, right? Design-wise, you're building to, a design that's from 3, 4, 5 years ago. Your house is going to look dated the moment it's sold, right? The moment it hits the market.
Totally.
And so again, that comes from expertise. You also want to usually get a designer involved, and then look at the actual design of the house. So it's not just the finish out and finishes, but it's really who is your buyer in this neighborhood and what do they want, right? Do they want is this a family neighborhood and they want 4 or 5 bedrooms, right? Is it near schools that people want to go to, right? High demand. Or conversely, is an area where there aren't much kids, right? And they'd rather have some amenities rather than just loading it up with bedrooms,
Totally.
So really getting into your product type, you have to do the research and take the time to go out there and look around and again, get great advice from your realtor.
Yeah.
On that note, you said do your research, Scott. And the more that you mentioned at the very beginning of this, it's almost more of an art than it is a science. But when I think of art, I think of painting. And I'm I think I could spend a lot of time trying to learn how to paint. And I don't know how great of a painter I would ever be. But being a spec builder almost sounds like if you put the time in, this is certainly an art that you can learn.
Yeah.
You mentioned research. Let's say Bearded Builders, owned by Reece Barnes, wants to start building speculative homes, and I've never built a speculative home before. Is this just do it for 5 years, build custom homes for 5 years, get involved with the buyer, get involved with this, and then leverage real estate professionals, and then Google something what's hot right now, or what do you research to know what goes?
I'll let Amanda answer that before I do. Go ahead, Amanda. I've got a couple of short answers to that.
Well, I did that this morning. So I spent 3 hours with a builder client, and we did the research. So for us, the research was looking at all the comps in the neighborhood for the similar home style that they wanted to build. For 2 hours, we looked at homes. So we looked at various levels of finish out to figure out where they wanted to fit in, where they thought they would fit in and how they thought they would compare. So that ultimately we could come back and say, okay, let's figure out what we think are, again, so much of this, I think, is going to lean on someone that does more than you do, right? If you're trying to learn and do the research, right? You want to lean on someone that has that expertise. And as a real estate professional, I represent buyers. I know what buyers are looking at. We went and looked at the finish out. I know what floor plans are successful. We talked about why certain homes stayed on the market and why certain homes sold faster. So we're trying to come up with this program that we think will be the most successful. So there's certainly a data research component of this that is numbers. And then there's an in-person, we're looking at homes and finish out. And there's let's put it all together. What do we think is the Goldilocks solution here?
Yeah, I think it also comes down to just admitting you don't know what you don't know as a builder, right? You could be a stellar builder, build a great house. Builders have all worked with folks who are superb in terms of construction, but might not be the best with clients, right? Same thing. You might be a great builder at doing whatever the client and the architect are asking you to do and executing very well. But once it becomes a creative process, right, then all of a sudden you're like, well, I don't know what I like or not. You've never really been asked that question. So, rather than think, oh, I got to pick something, which ultimately you do, you got to ask your experts, right? I would say that it's all market-based. Right. Get out and look at the market. Nothing wrong with being similar to somebody. You don't have to be completely unique. That adds a little bit of risk if you're not careful. I'd say.
And there's a back and forth with us. Oh, sorry. There's a back and forth with us, Scott. The cost of building something is not my expertise. So we'll do this back and forth thing. Some of the comps have a rooftop deck. Okay, well, is it worth it for us to have a rooftop deck? Well, I don't know. How much does it cost to build that deck? And so there's this back and forth. Well, I think it would add this in value. How much does it cost? And we collaborate on that. And then there's this third, I mean, there are plenty of professionals involved in this process, but certainly this third arm of this, which is the design aspect. I'm not an architect. I'm not an interior designer. I know what buyers are responding to, so I can give very broad advice on these styles I'm seeing more often. I'm seeing things like this go under contract more quickly. But you will do yourself a disservice if you attempt, unless you are really an incredibly gifted interior designer, picking all of these finishes. I know it's easier and cheaper to do that, but gosh, relying on someone that's really up to date on the trends and a really savvy interior designer can also, they know how to source things that are less expensive, but look good. I mean, they can help you value engineer if you need to do that. They can help you really need a higher price point, as much experience as I have with buyers looking, we have homeowners designing these things and know what people are responding to.
Yeah, I think that's an important caveat. I think I've used an interior designer on every spec I've ever done for the most part, except for maybe one or two. It really does help sort of just say, hey, does it look okay? We all have that sort of doubt as we're picking any kind of finish in our houses.
Right.
It's helpful to ask an expert.
I can tell the homes that don't.
That's right. And sometimes they come together, right? You go out showing houses and you're like, man, this home is really good looking, right? And sometimes you can't quite put your finger on it. It could be design, it could be finishes, it could be a little bit of both. But ultimately, it's all driven by the market. And I would almost say that interior designers have a better feel for some of that than architects do. I would say that's another thing that you'd really want to be careful of in terms of picking a site here is architects are great at designing, homes that people live in that meet their needs and so on, but they're not out in the marketplace every day selling houses, right? Or building houses. So the architect is secondary in terms of this part of the process, that you really need to look at what the market is doing and then design to that market, and that's the architect's job.
Mm-hmm. I'm hearing that they would like volume again. Do your volume on your deals, do your volume on your conversation, having a strong team, interior designers, real estate agents, brokers, builders. It's a very collaborative process to know your market. It's not like necessarily all chalked up just to one individual. It's kind of like starting with building a team. How do you know your market? You got to build a team.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's what I'm sitting here thinking. It's kind of the same thing where it's like, sounds kind of complicated, and usually like that could be interpreted as a negative thing from some builders. Like, I don't want to deal with that. But for those that are interested, it's a positive, I think, because the more complicated something is, generally, the more opportunity you have to stand out.
Bang.
Through a combination of like relationships and diligence and all these other things. So I thought that was an interesting overview.
And to sort of tie this into the bottom line, that complexity is a way to try and manage your risk, right? So what we've been talking about here is the risk of, well, if you without any of the things we're talking about, could somebody go out and buy a lot, try and build something, and maybe they get it right, maybe they don't. Well, yeah, but that's a little more risky than if you do your homework and are patient and look around and try and learn as much as you can about the market that you're in. And that includes some of the other details about specific lots. Amanda started out sort of saying, hey, there are differences between lots, but you also need to know what you're looking at there in terms of building codes. Deed restrictions are really important. You got to make sure you're not accidentally in violation of deed restrictions, which happens more often than you would think, even to seasoned builders, You just have to pay attention to some of these details up front, and so that they don't become problems later on down the line.
Yeah. That point though, Scott, like paying attention to the details up front, I think also on a specific job level, right? Let's figure out the details up front so we don't get screwed over later. But then I also think that what Amanda was saying earlier with once she described as saturated in a market, you have a lot of returns there. You have an advantage basically, right? Because like this is complex. You got to build a team, you got to know the market, but then once you've done it, there's a bunch of lots for you to potentially go buy and take advantage of that. others won't be able to compete with you on as effectively. So I think
that's exactly what I was thinking, Matt. It's a competitive advantage. Just like anything else you do for a while, it's a competitive advantage, right?
yes.
And you start to get to leverage your strengths, right? And every builder has different strengths. It doesn't mean you can't do a spec. You don't have to have a certain, build a certain kind of house to do a spec or not. Anybody can. You just got to know what you're getting into and try and figure out what's your competitive advantage. We try and build homes that are slightly, better in terms of quality than our competition, right? Go around and look at the competition. Well, what are some ways in which I can improve on my quality, right?
Yeah.
Because a lot of times the buyers aren't used to custom finishes, right? So things that a custom builder might just assume is a standard finish, a buyer might think is a luxury finish, right?
Mhm.
So I think it's important to pay attention to that sort of basket of specifications and style. That go into a house, and try and beat it a little bit.
Yeah. I mean, I think that was the point you made earlier in the call, Scott. You said these people aren't looking for they're looking for stuff that's available in the infill environment. The buyers, they're looking for stuff that's available. That would tell me they're just a little bit less like they're not your typical custom home buyer who's very discerning.
Yeah. Oh, it's a totally different standard, right? They're if you're buying an existing home right next door, that doesn't come with a builder warranty. That doesn't come with a punch list, right? It doesn't come with a lot of the features that are perhaps built into a new home that an existing home wouldn't have. But they buy that new home if it was they buy that existing home next door just as quickly, right?
Yeah.
So again, I guess that's another way to say you got to build to your market because you're competing with an existing home potentially. And some of those things that add value as builders don't necessarily matter too much in the open market.
I mean, even like kind of a case in point in a way is like your interior designer strategy sounds like it's kind of a no-brainer because you dress the house with some nice furniture and then it allows you to sell it a lot more effectively. Like you didn't necessarily change anything about the house. It's just like the buyers themselves aren't super discerning. They walk in, they're like kind of emotional buyers, like, wow, this looks really nice. Like, where do I sign? Versus a custom home buyer who's like, I'm going to be patient. I want to sit down.
Yeah.
I want to go through 5 different iterations and I'm going to change everything. It's just a different buyer type.
It really is. In fact, so much so that there's occasionally we'll try and pre-sell them, right? If we have a development with more than just one unit, et cetera. And we found that if you're not pre-selling while it's still essentially a conceptual design on a piece of paper, right? That once you get it framed up, the market actually decreases. People just have a hard time walking into the guts of a house and just seeing the finished product. So you're trying to sell a house that's being roughed in. I mean, it can't help but leave a bad impression, right? Nobody wants to see the inside of your house, really. You want to see all the finishes. So we found you're either pre-selling it or you wait until it's almost done. And put it on the market where people can see the finishes, et cetera. And I'll put in a plug now for something that I think every good realtor in the country will do as a matter of course, and that is staging. That you have to budget for really good staging on these houses to get top dollar. It really makes a difference in terms of the first impression because you're, again, competing with an existing home that might have existing furniture in it and look quite nice.
Oh, yeah. That's what I meant. Staging, not interior design. That's
you budget for staging because that will help you sell your house faster and for more money.
Yes. Cool. Well, I guess one other thing. So Amanda, how do builders find someone like you with your specialty?
Well, I think it's really good to see who's already selling homes. So look, go drive by houses you like, see who signs in the yard, see who's doing the business. You want to work with someone that's transacting in the areas that you're looking at, that's really doing business.
Yeah, makes sense.
And I'll go ahead and answer the question for you, Matt, because Amanda is so humble and so polite. You can find Amanda at her own website.
Oh, yes.
Amanda, and you pronounce your name much better than I did, Trevino.
Yes, that works.
Amanda Trevino, Trevino. If you're a builder in Austin and wanting to get involved, she's a wealth of knowledge. You should hit her up.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Cool. This is a great overview. So know your markets. And then next we'll get into know your numbers, which obviously is related. Then you can,
that's right. We kind of tapped into it
quickly. Yeah.
And I really had to pull back the reins because Amanda started to talk about cost, about knowing your market. And I was like, had to get pulled back a little bit. But Exactly. Appreciate you guys hopping on. We'll let you get back to it. And thanks for joining Builders, Budgets, and Beers.
Thanks, y'all. Always a pleasure.